They were called the Watchers, angels sent to observe mankind, not to interfere, not to touch, only to watch. But the longer they watched, the more they wanted. They didn't desire thrones, riches, or war. They were tempted by something far more dangerous: desire. And not just for any woman, for the daughters of Cain. Women who had already turned their backs on the Creator. They lived for pleasure. They moved like temptation. They spoke like fire. They weren't innocent. They knew they were being watched, and they liked it. The Watchers couldn't look away. Hearts began to burn. Divine minds began to fall. And when angels fall, it's never silent. They crossed a line that was never meant to be touched, not by force, but by choice. They left their place in the heights and descended into the shadows, willingly, fully, forever. Where they were meant to protect, they chose to rebel. Where they were meant to stay pure, they embraced corruption. And in that moment, a crack appeared between heaven and earth. Heaven's silence was about to end, but this was only the beginning. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. Because what happened next wasn't love. It was rebellion. And they made it together. The Watchers didn't seduce innocent girls. They were met halfway. The daughters of Cain didn't flinch. They welcomed them. Not for affection. Not for romance. They wanted something more. Forbidden knowledge. Secrets from heaven. Power that no mortal was ever meant to hold. And the Watchers, they didn't come for war. They came for flesh. Pleasure. The one thing they were never allowed to taste. And now they did. It wasn't forced. It wasn't tragic. It was mutual. A pact. A deal. Heavenly secrets for earthly bodies. And as the days turned into nights, the knowledge poured in. The Watchers taught them things that had no place on earth. How to summon. How to cast. How to shape metal into weapons. How to twist herbs into spells. Sorcery. Warfare. Dark arts whispered in sacred tongues. And through it all, the women changed. They weren't just learning. They were becoming. Becoming queens in a kingdom not yet built. Mothers of a new order. And then, they gave birth. But what they gave birth to wasn't human. They weren't victims of the rebellion. They were the ignition. Not just companions to the fallen, but co-creators of the greatest cosmic crime ever committed. But what they gave birth to wasn't human. They weren't babies. They were weapons. Nephilim, born from heaven's rebels and earth's daughters. Giants that grew fast, ruled hard, and destroyed without mercy. They didn't build. They consumed. Every crop, every animal, every man that stood in their path. And when there was nothing left to take, they turned on mankind. Skies turned red. Blood soaked the ground. The earth groaned under the weight of their violence. And the women? They didn't run. They stood beside them. As queens. Proud. Adored. Mothers of monsters. Builders of thrones made from broken bones. And while mankind screamed, heaven stayed silent. Not because it was blind, but because it was waiting. Waiting for the cry that would reach beyond blood. Waiting for the moment when judgment would no longer be delayed. And finally, one angel heard it all. And he didn't forget. He waited, with fire in his eyes. And he didn't forget. He waited, with fire in his eyes. Justice was coming. But mercy had to die first. Michael, the great archangel, stood still. He watched, from the heights, as the rebellion on earth grew bolder, louder, darker. He saw the Watchers teaching sorcery. He saw the Nephilim crushing cities. He saw the women, smiling. They weren't broken. They weren't ashamed. They danced in the ruins. They laughed beside giants. They ruled beside beasts. They wore crowns made of stolen glory. And their hearts beat with pride. No regret. No repentance. Just celebration. Celebration of a kingdom that wasn't theirs to build. A kingdom soaked in blood. Michael didn't flinch. He didn't rage. He simply watched. Because even divine patience has a limit. And when that limit shattered, the silence broke. Heaven spoke. And Michael received the order. The fallen angels would be judged. But the women, they would face something far worse. Because they weren't just companions to rebellion. They were its fuel. And Michael received the order. He didn't come with a message. He came with a mission. Heaven wasn't sending a warning. It was sending a weapon. The earth trembled as he descended. The skies tore open. And what stood between man and destruction was now standing in judgment. Michael didn't speak. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He acted. The Watchers were seized, dragged from their thrones of stone and shadow, and bound. Not with ropes, but with chains forged from divine command, buried beneath deserts, sealed under forgotten mountains, locked for 70 generations in silence. But the women? They weren't chained. Their sentence was different, because their crime wasn't strength, it was seduction. And the punishment wasn't death, it was something far more precise. Their beauty, the very thing they used to tempt heaven, was about to become their curse. The crowns they wore would crumble. The names they gloried in would rot. The very image they held dear would be torn away. Michael didn't take their lives. He took their legacy. He took their legacy. Some were destroyed. Others were changed. Ancient texts whisper of a darker sentence, one not written in stone, but carved into spirit. The women weren't just stripped of glory. They were transformed. Not human. Not angel. Something in between. Something twisted. They became sirens. Once beautiful, now monstrous. Cursed to seduce, not to be loved, but to bring ruin. They were no longer worshipped. They were feared, marked, banished, outcasts of heaven, rejects of earth. No place to belong. No name to remember. Unclean. Unwanted. Eternal. Because their punishment wasn't death. It was distortion. They became a curse. A warning. A myth. A shadow in every ancient shore. And even now, their cries still echo today. Not in stories, but just beneath the surface. The curse never ended. The sirens, those same women, still roam, still lure, still destroy. And the world still listens to their song. Still roam, still lure, still destroy. And the world still listens to their song. You think this was ancient history? Look again. Jesus once said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man." He wasn't talking about rain. He wasn't warning about water. He was describing a return of something much darker. Today we celebrate what once brought the flood. We call it progress, innovation. But look closer. Minds without souls. Machines that think but don't feel. Bodies redesigned. Genes edited. Flesh reprogrammed. Blending man and machine. Merging bloodlines once more. A rebellion wearing a new disguise. We've seen this pattern before. Hidden in labs. Wired into code. Praised by science. Feared by silence. Because it's not just technology evolving. It's the spirit behind it. The same one that taught mankind to twist creation is whispering again. The spirit of the Watchers has returned. And Michael, he will rise again. And Michael, he will rise again. Last time, he ended it with fire. But this time, he's not coming alone. The scriptures speak clearly. There will be war in heaven. Michael and his angels, against the dragon and every force behind the rebellion. Same mission. Same sword. No compromise. He's not returning to forgive. He's returning to finish. Because the wives of the fallen, they were only the beginning. The real terror was what they gave birth to, the Nephilim. And though the flood drowned their empires, their blood didn't vanish. It slipped through, hidden, preserved, waiting. And the prophecy says, they will rise again. It won't be subtle. It won't be silent. This time, it won't be hidden in shadows. It will be war in the open. Heaven against earth. Angel against monster. Light against ancient corruption. And when it begins, the only question that will matter is this. Will you be on the right side of the sword? Somehow, the bloodline survived. Through flood. Through fire. Through history. And now it stirs again. Not as myth, but as prophecy.